Coming up, we will welcome a futurist, a venture partner and founder at productize, Johannes Kastner, joining us from the UK. Since 2008, he has built experiments in cognitive economics and collective intelligence. Adopting some open source software for his experiments got him hired as a senior data scientist at eBay, where he worked on applications involving Bayesian networks and knowledge graphs, as well as more standard NLP machine learning problems. Johannes then founded his own startup called productize, which is a consultancy focused on applications of collective intelligence, a nascent interdisciplinary field with many industrial applications that has an annual conference. In addition to productize, since 2018, Johannes has been part of a number of AI consultancies in London, England, where he has been working on a diverse set of businesses intelligence, healthcare, and smart city projects. Welcome, Johannes Kastner. Please take over.
Hello, my name is Johannes Kastner, and I'm about to tell you about a number of perplexities in ethical AI, and with an eye toward, in the end, arriving at a recipe for having an AI that learns to represent a diverse community. If you have seen earlier the talk by Noel Silver Russell, you might find that there are some rhymes here with her talk, which I found quite excellent. So here, what I want to talk about, first I'll tell you what I'll be talking about, starting with the definitions, and then going into what ethical AI is, and then touching upon some ethical schools of thought, and then arriving at an impossibility. And then I want to talk about how we get from the usual topics that are addressed when we're talking about ethical AIs, which are biases and privacy concerns usually. And also there's this unexplainability issue. And then I want to move from that toward a purpose-built AI that is purposefully ethical in a positive sense. And then I want to talk a little bit about biases, actually. So I want to address them. So that's it starts with this idea that we really teach the machines what they do, and then I want to go explain why even a no-nonsense profit maximizer, someone who only cares to maximize profits, should still care about ethical AI. And then in the end, I will talk about a recipe that has sort of emerged from a cutting-edge literature recently that I would like to talk about. That basically is about how an AI learns how to represent a diverse community and their ethical views, really. So starting with some definitions, and I want to say really quickly that these definitions are not sacrosanct in any way. They're not, you don't need to internalize them. They're just useful for the duration of this talk so that you understand what I'm talking about. So starting with AI, Oxford Language Dictionary says that it's the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. I take no issue with this definition. I usually tend to call it augmented AI, intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. I touch upon that as well. Ethics is the subfield of philosophy that asks what is the good life, and algorithms should support this idea of the good life. Social choice, and this is an important topic. I have to bring this up because at some point we will see that this will prove necessary. Social choice is the field concerned with combining individual opinions, preferences, interests, or welfare measures to reach a collective decision. And lastly, human-centered AI is the AI that is tightly coupled with human processes so that it learns from human input and from collaboration with humans. So then we have the definitions out of the way. Let us ask the question, what is the good life? Or rather, what is the algorithm that, what kind of algorithms support the good life? Ethics, right? And so the usual subjects that are often presented when it comes to what you can do with AI are on the left side. Increase revenues. Amazon has used one single algorithm, namely the recommendation engine, to increase its revenue by 35%. This is massive. But unfortunately, it has in the process also contributed to a number of problems, namely that we read less diverse books, that we are basically pigeonholed into taste communities, and then ultimately probably also, and this is not decisive, but even contributed to polarization because of these taste communities. They can no longer read each other's books, right? A book recommended to another taste community will not be recommended to me, and vice versa. So then better understand customers. I honestly never understood this line. They often talk about it, but I don't actually precisely know what they mean by it. Much more tractable is the concept of the optimization of marketing expenses. Those are pretty straightforward. Usually they do not cause an ethical stir, but should we prioritize on those, or should we prioritize on products that serve humans? And I would think that the latter is preferable to choose when we have to prioritize finite resources. Then, enable self-driving cars or self-flying cars, right? These are great things because it turns out that these self-driving cars that have been on the road for quite some time have many fewer accidents than humans, given their the number of miles that they've driven. Of course, there is this problem that we are skeptical when there's one accident. When there's one accident, in fact, it's on the news. When there's an accident with an automated, with an algorithm. And then, smart parking, which is great because it reduces CO2 overall. People can take fewer time to find a parking space, and that's great for them. But it's also great for all the other people because there will be no traffic jam, and there will be less local smog that's being released. So on the right side, there are the ideal things that you might think about when you think about good AI or AI for good. That is to eliminate suffering for patients and healthcare. That is to rewild the wastelands, to eliminate pollutants in water and air, and make society more inclusive, to eliminate fake news, and so on. The list goes on. Unfortunately, often there is less budget devoted to the things on the right side, although they are much more unambiguously good than there are to the things on the left side that are, sometimes have questionable elements. So systems, in short, should empower humans. They should give us more freedom. Technology is there to empower us. That is the ultimate ethic that I believe should be relevant. So then, how different is AI ethics just from central decision making, right? So if an AI system is to represent us, then we have to apply the same logic that we apply to democratic decision making and to representative governments. So the algorithms actually represented then the affected people, all people that might be affected by the algorithm, ideally. And then, because you see, an algorithm is never autonomous. An algorithm always represents someone, usually the person who builds it, the company. It's usually very narrow, the people who are represented. But millions of people are affected by these algorithms, where only few are represented. So this is similar to what Noel Silver-Russell was speaking about earlier, in fact. And then, here I just want to pick up some philosophical ingredients that will go into a very practical recipe at the end. And that, therefore, it's a little bit different angle from her talk, which was quite surrounded. It was mostly around real applications that she's already built. So how different is again, algorithms should empower humans. I can't say that enough. So here I want to present to you a couple, or three to be precise, schools of thought in philosophy and ethics. And I want to do this on hand of a story that is found in Amartya Sen's book, The Idea of Justice. And this should give you an idea as to why we shouldn't think of ethics in AI as to, as in ethics yes or ethics no, but we should think about it rather in terms of what ethic. And so here, let's talk about this, and this should make it quite clear, this little story. 3 friends, children, Anna, Bob, and Clara, are walking along the same path until they get to a 3-way fork in the road, at which they must go separate ways. But before they can say their goodbyes, they have a difficult decision to make. They have a flute among them that must be permanently given to one of the children as they split ways. Anna says that the flute should be given to her because she is the only one who knows how to play it. Bob says the flute should be handed to him as he is so poor. He has no toys to play with. Clara says that the flute is hers because she made it. So I did a little poll on LinkedIn, and I found that about 41% of the people who answered this answered it in a utilitarian way. I want to say Anna gets the flute, the one who can play it. That is a utilitarian approach. Bob should get it according to 12% of the respondents. And then that school of thought would be called egalitarianism of some form or the other. And then C, Clara gets the flute, about 47%, the majority of people voted for this option. And that is the libertarian option, represented by someone, by Robert Nozick, for example. And so I have here 3 different philosophers who are all extremely acclaimed, and they would all disagree with each other. And so there is actually, I want to say really quickly that a philosophical stance or an ethic is not the same as a bias. So we have to really not think only in terms of biases. We have to actually think about an ethical school of thought. And since they can be conflicting, therefore, what actually comes out of this is that we should have a representative approach. How many libertarians are in our society? If most people are libertarians, maybe we want to make a libertarian decision, and so on. Then I want to speak a little bit about biases, as they are extremely important. And I want to make clear that what this starts, where we're starting to get into, is that humans teach AI what to do. And it starts with these biases, right? So Amazon had built a recruiting tool that turned out to show biases against women. Why is that? Because they trained the system on previous CVs that they used in the past for hiring decisions, going back in time. Of course, if the hiring decisions in the past were biased against women, then the system will learn this bias. Racial bias was found in a major healthcare risk algorithm, and that was because healthcare cost was used as the metric by which to differentiate people who are more or less risky. So if you spend more money on a service, you are considered to be a higher risk by this algorithm. And then lastly, I want to talk about Compass, which is a really important example, where people who are inmates in prison awaiting the decision whether they can be let go or not. And this decision is based on an algorithm that basically puts out a risk factor of recidivism, of repeating the crime, right? And this was basically, we don't actually know how this works, right? But these are the 2 distributions of the here we have African American, and here we have white. On the right side there, the white distribution. On the left side there is the African American distribution of how it predicts recidivism. So it's quite flat throughout the African American population, but it is heavily skewed toward the left in the white population, and therefore extremely biased. So we're starting, now I want to come to a sort of hierarchy of evils, if you will. So someone can come up with a pretty biased algorithm without intending any harm. They just have bad data, they have biased data. But then the disinformation for profit business model, and I think this is a very important thing to consider, that often it is business models and not the algorithms, but the algorithms supporting them of course, if an algorithm supports a rotten business model, it will lead to rotten results. And disinformation for profit, for example, is a really awful thing. So there are 3 movies that came out in order of severity of evil, if you will. Coded Bias, about biases, The Social Dilemma, about disinformation for profits, and then this last one, which is called The Great Hack, where they unleashed military methods to meddle with foreign elections on our own populations in the West, particularly on the 2016 election of Donald Trump in America. So 3 main issues with algorithms beyond the social choice problem and biases. So 1, business models are not based on human freedoms. They are, for example, based on attention, is another one. Algorithms lack transparency. I find this a lesser problem because human decisions also lack transparency. 3, users are not empowered to improve the system. I think this is a very important thing, given that millions of people are affected by these algorithms. Millions of people should be able to weigh in to how they make their decisions. Then, how does a no-nonsense profit maximizer might care about ethics? Why would they care about ethics? I often hear this, right? Why should I care about ethics? I just want to build cool stuff. And for one thing, there are a lot of lawsuits directed toward people who have built cool stuff in the past. You can look at this right here, Meta. Then here we go. These different companies, TikTok and so on. They all have these huge lawsuits because it's found out that they push violent videos on minorities, for example, and so on. And the story goes on. And this then creates also a bad motivation in the employees. So you don't want to work for a company that has a rotten reputation, that builds things that are not wonderful for people. You want to change the world for the better. A lot of employees care about this. And there are some surveys about this, Harvard Business Review and Gartner. So then in the end, even if you only care about sustainable revenues, you should care about a trusted brand. And also, I just want to bring up really quickly the example of Quayside. Quayside was a project in Toronto had $900 million funding, and it was going over 2 years, and there were lots of protests against it, right? It was built from the technology first perspective rather than from the human first perspective. Ultimately, it was scrapped as COVID began, and COVID became the excuse. But then it was replaced by a beautiful project that actually took humans first and the environment first, and it made it into, it has a lot of birds in it and a much more park directed, so green space, and much less technology and technological solutions. And so that's, a big lesson we could learn, because $900 million investment and a lot of hype, and led ultimately to nothing. So we don't need to repeat this mistake. Then, here, lastly, this is very important. I want to give you a recipe for ethical pluralism. So for one thing, you should not just ask if artificial intelligence is good or fair or any of those questions, but you should ask, how does it shift power? How does it shift human power? And that then leads us to this representation, this idea of participatory AI, to build AI together. And so there are many different approaches to this. Noel Silver Russell was earlier talking about a participatory approach where you bring a lot of people into the same room, a very diverse group of people into the room, and you ask them different questions about what needs to be built and what needs to be prioritized. I also think that there is another way, and that is interesting, and that is to, when there is a system that makes decisions, many uncontroversial decisions maybe, and then a few controversial ones, that when there are controversial decisions, when it knows so it has to simultaneously learn that it's controversial, and when these decisions are controversial, it basically requires human labeling of this decision. What is the good decision to be done, to be taken? And then you arrive at this sort of distribution of what people think. And with that distribution, you can't always satisfy everyone, but you will be able to sort of minimize unhappiness or feeling of unfairness in the group, because you are concerned with everyone's views, and the algorithm is, and it learns a sort of a strategy of of compromise. So this is along the axis. So what do you do? The answer lies in participation, clearly. So you start with you rule out the unethical, the completely obvious cases, or the bias, and you try to fix the data set to be balanced and so on. Then you use this participatory toolkit. You try to create a really vibrant participation. And that can involve elements of game theory as well. One way to do it, you can also, so I already spoke about these distributions of labels for decisions, for example. There are a lot of different ways to build participatory systems. And that's pretty much concludes my talk. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Johannes. That was great. I enjoyed it. You're one of my favorite speakers here. So let's see. We still have 15 minutes. All right. It's funny you should talk about the ethics and biases. In my own work, I was recently tasked with identifying accents from American speakers, and African American vernacular English was the topic. Now, I find that many times, a speech pattern will be identified as African American based on the race of the speaker. Whereas if we have something like, Barack Obama, James Earl Jones, Denzel Washington, they don't speak African American vernacular English. They speak
That's correct. Yeah.
English, for instance. Okay. So I got a lot of voice samples that were labeled as African American vernacular English, and the speaker was not speaking African American vernacular English. The question I have is, do we need to be wary of applying our ethics when perhaps the reality or the truth doesn't really care about our ethics? Don't we really need to focus on what our data actually is?
Well, I mean, what does it mean that the data is something, right? So we end up with a label, right? So this label, African American vernacular English, for example, has been put there by someone, and generally not someone who's African American, and generally also probably not someone who lives in the South or in states where there are similar dialects to African American vernacular English being spoken by not African American people. And so it has to involve these people. Ultimately, what you have to do is in order to distinguish these things, and I think it can be very important ethically, and it depends on the application really. But what you have to do is you have to involve the people who can really give you the biggest differentiation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's a good answer. And that was what I did. I did my best to, Barack Obama doesn't speak African American vernacular English. He just doesn't. Okay. So let's see. Take one from the audience. We have Ms. Renalyn Lopez here, and she asks, what can you say about algorithms being criticized as a method for obscuring racial prejudices in decision making?
Let me see. Okay, could you say this once more? This is a bit of a long one. I'm gonna try to.
She says, what can you say about algorithms being criticized as a method for obscuring racial prejudices in decision making? It kind of relates back to what I asked.
Right. So it depends on yeah. So yeah, exactly. It relates to what you ask. Basically, yes, they can have this feature that they actually obscure racial prejudices and such things. But that is because they are designed poorly. So it really depends on the design here. And design, I mean, really the label ultimately, and the breadth of data and the diversity in the data.
Rebecca Colicino asks, in practical terms, what are the changes and steps organizations should make to start producing ethical AI?
In practical terms, it means that they have to figure out feedback mechanisms with the people affected by their algorithms. They have to be able to be criticized in a way that is quantifiable. For example, you make a decision, you go to the left, you go to the right. I can say it was good, I can say it was bad, right? And a lot of different people can see that, so they can criticize it, and they can be directly involved. I think that is where we have to move towards. We have to move towards much more participatory approaches. And I think that's the responsibility for the company to do. Did that answer the question?
Sorry, I muted my mic. Let's see. Pascal Hernandez says, we are expecting that artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning will act like a human. But according to Sartre and phenomenology, is it possible that AI can reach that?
Well, it depends on what you mean by acting like a human, right? So it will never. So that's very interesting. It can fake being similar to a human. I think it's very close to this already. But when you are talking about its own purpose, can it ever develop its own reason to do something? The answer, I think, to that is no. Why would it? And the thing is, it wouldn't. It would have to be built. So for that, someone would have to say, I want to build a system that creates its own purpose, that just meanders and says, I want to do X or Z randomly, or by some kind of process. And that will never be built. There's no actual business purpose for this, I don't think. So in that sense, but in the sense of playing chess like a human, yes, it plays better than humans. And in the sense of playing Go like a human, it plays better than a human. In terms of driving like a human, it will do better than a human. All of those tasks that a human sets out for them to do, it might do better than a human being.
All right. Neil Balba asks, what are the biggest ethical issues regarding AI and the future of humanity? How can we face these ethical issues to ensure AI will be embraced by humanity without hesitation?
I think that if we can build it together, if we really have access to build it together, to participate, that is when we trust it, right? We trust what we can do together, when we can see it. There's also something to be said about this transparency issue. It'll be difficult because it's also difficult with human minds. You cannot look inside of them. And it's unfortunately similar with these algorithms. You cannot really understand why they make their decisions. But when it comes to what decisions they should make and so on, we can train them to do whatever it is we want them to decide. And with that, if we do that, then I think we will trust it.
All right. You spoke extensively about building AI to scale and the importance of doing it responsibly. An AI company in Canada recently announced 12 projects which represent more than $50 million in investments in artificial intelligence, and how this continues the country's rapid adoption of AI. The integration of AI represents a vector of growth, productivity, competitiveness, and has significant benefits for the entire Canadian economy. How is AI proving essential in efforts to address these crucial challenges supply chains face today, including the ripple effects of the pandemic and the demands and labor shortages?
Well, so you can look at the profits of, for example, Amazon during the pandemic, and you see that they were enormous. And part of this is your answer right there. So basically, they have been extremely successful to deliver things to people. And during pandemic, during difficult times where supply chains had problems, for example, Chinese companies did, and so on. And yet, there are some giant companies that have taken advantage of this. There are also smaller companies that have taken advantage of algorithms in every aspect of their businesses. And so this is already much, this is not a matter of the future. This is a matter of almost yesterday, if you will.
Much of your work is focused on AI and healthcare and based around the theme of AI as an augmentation to human intelligence and can broaden freedom and capabilities. Effective augmentation appears to be finally happening with medical imaging. A large-scale study just published in the Lancet Digital Health is the first to directly compare AI cancer screening when used alone or to assist humans. This AI software is already used in more than 25% of Germany's breast cancer screening centers. In what other ways are healthcare workers utilizing AI to help diagnose patients and possibly save lives?
Wow, this could be a whole book of things. Well, you can start from language. Often doctors and nurses don't understand um, various languages, and the translation, the AI that will help you with translation, is going to, it has already made huge impacts, right? You can tell them where it hurts, what kind of symptoms you have, what sort of family history you have in your language, and then it will be translated and the doctors understand. For example, that's just one of many, 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 many examples of applications where this can help. So also genetic, really interesting gene sequencing and precision medicine, where an algorithm might give you a very specific diagnosis or a very specific treatment that is based on you, not just sort of a statistical mass of people, if that makes sense. So there's just an unending, this field is transforming itself extremely fast at the moment.
All right, let's see, what do we have here? Now that we've looked at many of the benefits AI offers, let's discuss the challenges for startups to implement AI in Web 3.0. What do you think about some people's concerns that advances in AI will affect what it means to be human, to be productive, and to exercise free will?
Oh, that's a great question. It's very packed. So that depends on, again, what happens. Right now, even companies like Google and AWS and IBM and so on, all of them, and Microsoft. I don't want to leave anyone out, but at the same time, there's a huge, huge list of them, and they are all on that bandwagon of building more human-friendly AI. So if we succeed in this, if we really work on this hard, and if we this is also a huge difference with, for example, the Chinese development of artificial intelligence, right? So we're on a completely different trajectory. And it also depends on regulation and understanding the ethical issues better. And I think we're working on that, and therefore, I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that we will be building a sort of utopic kind of future, and we can do that. We can also throw ourselves into various dystopias. For example, as certain algorithms have shown that have caused us to become less intellectually capable, to become simplified in our thinking, and also to like the thing I was alluding to before about this filter bubbles and so on. And these are things that are disservices to humans. And in fact, I think that this could also be our future. And it could be a bunch of these problems if we don't solve them.
All right, we'll take one more question from the audience here. Jim Abelos asks, is a perfect human-centered AI a possible bridge to AGI? Why or why not?
Yeah, so this whole thing about AGI, I'm not sure about that. I don't know what it means, right? So it could mean, so to some people it means that if you chain together all of the functions of what humans are capable of, you could take a bunch of different algorithms that do all these things, right? A self-driving car algorithm, you have another one that can paint, another one that does, all of these things. You can just put them all together, and then you have, human behavior, human-like behavior. You can call that AGI, right? You can then be done with it. But if you want this sentience or something like that, I think you'll be waiting, millennia for that. I don't even see why anyone would build it, much less a path toward it, or that we are on such a path. We're not. We're clearly not on any of such path.
All right. We got about 50 seconds left. Why don't you choose a question from the right side of your screen to win a prize for the most thoughtful question for us?
Why don't I see these questions pop up? I don't have a right side of my screen. Sorry, I don't see these questions.
The question mark on the right, question mark in the green circle.
Okay.
Participant questions.
I like that one about The one about obscuring racial prejudices in decision making, I think that's an important question. I think it should be.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Johannes. I really enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed your talk. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. And thank you to all the audience.
Right. And for the audience, stick around. We've got more talkers to come.